Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this episode of the Niche Cast coming at you on Monday morning, Monday the 30th of October. We're from theniche-case.com, and we are here to chat through a pretty amazing weekend of Aotearoa sport. I thought it was. Not many wins.
Yeah, not necessarily amazing in results, but amazing in the spectacles, definitely. And a
Yeah,
few amazing results in there.
and some amazing results as well. It was a thoroughly enjoyable weekend of Aotearoa sport. You take the wins, you take the losses, and it's always easier to digest when the England cricket team just keeps getting absolutely destroyed. So, regardless of what's happening with Aotearoa sport, there's always one of those teams, one of those nations like the England cricket team that we do like to poke fun at for saving Test cricket and everything they do for the world of cricket. Thank you very much, because you're also providing a bit of joy for us the way you capitulate. But that's just that's just me personal. I can't speak for you and I can't speak for anyone else. I just thoroughly enjoy it when the England cricket team is getting destroyed. We do have some big yarns on our website, theniche-case.com. I rolled through the Josh Curran departure from the Aotearoa Warriors because I think it just tells the story of how the Warriors are operating right now, as the Bulldogs sign the scraps from other NRL teams like Josh Curran. The Warriors, they develop players. That's what they're up to right now. Josh Curran wasn't much of a starter, and this is another key detail. We don't need to go deep into this because we do have fantastic sport to talk about, but I do think it's important to note, because everyone seems to forget the pandemic era, right? Like, the Warriors sucked during that period. What's the biggest difference this season to last season? The Warriors came back to New Zealand. And I kept seeing, like, Josh Curran, he was one of the best players during the pandemic. He was a servant to the club and all this other stuff while they were based in Australia. Like, Josh Curran's an Australian who played his best footy for the Warriors while they were based in Australia. What happens after that? Well, the Warriors signed Jackson Ford and Maratini Okore ahead of him, and he doesn't play his best footy coming back to New Zealand. So it's like the inverse.
Now he's left.
Now he's left. Like, it's another example of the black hole of the pandemic. Why did the Warriors sign Reece Walsh? Because he didn't have to move anywhere. He was in Australia. Why did they sign Nathan Brown? Didn't have to move anywhere. He was in Australia. Why did they sign Matt Lodge? Didn't have to move anywhere. They were in Australia. Why did Sean Johnson struggle? Because he was in Australia, away from his family. These things are important. These things are relevant. And now Josh Curran departs. He played a limited role this season. The Warriors have maybe at least 4 young players who can play that role. Couple of minutes off the bench. That's all Josh Curran did this season. Couple of minutes off the bench, couple of 80-minute games when Niokore Ford was unavailable. The Warriors have lots of players, local juniors, who can do exactly that. And that's on the website right now, theniche-case.com. We do have a lot of big yarns, and we will be writing more yarns during the week. So the regular cycle, National League debriefs, Plunket Shield recaps, Kiwi NRL deep dives are coming every week at the moment. Flying Kiwis, Blackcaps. Like, there's a lot of content already available on our website, theniche-case.com, for you to enjoy, and there'll be plenty more coming at you over the next few days as well. On Wednesday, we will be recording our subscriber podcast. If you do want to support the Niche Case straight up the guts, join the Patreon whānau or upgrade your Substack newsletter subscription to a paid subscription. Then you can access our subscriber podcast every week, and we'll be chatting any questions, comments, queries from our subscribers in the Patreon whānau in that subscriber podcast. It's like a little VIP section, if you will. Fantastic way to support the Niche Case directly. And you get access to the subscriber podcast. So shout out to all the Patreon whānau, and shout out to those people with a paid Substack subscription. We appreciate you for keeping the Niche Case going, because that's how we don't make any money, but that's how we keep things afloat. as we serve our mission to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence. And of course, our Monday and Friday newsletter will be coming out today because it's Monday night. Big newsletter, recapping and recapturing all the Aotearoa sporting funk from the weekend. We just write paragraphs for that. You get the podcast as part of that. You get all the links to the website as part of that. So sign up to that via Substack, thenichecage.substack.com. And let's just see what the mindfulness deities have in store for us.
Rightio. This is a quote from a fellow called Krishna Das, who sounds like an Indian guru, but I think is one of them like white Californian types who just took on a Hindi name in order to sound a little more legitimate. But it's a great quote, so fair play. Quote goes, "The heart is like a mirror. When we dust it off, we are able to see ourselves." You know what I like about that? It's the idea that the self is contained in the heart, as opposed to, I think, a lot of, certainly like the way modern society would treat it, is that the self would be contained in the brain, right? This is saying the self is in the heart. And not only that, the heart is a mirror, and when you dust it off, you can see yourself.
Yeah, there's not a lot of heart energies in my brain. The brain conjures up the doubt. The brain conjures up the anxiety. The brain throws up all these like memories or thoughts or anything kind of negative. It's my brain. None of that comes from my heart or my soul. So I might need to dust off the old heart. Give it a little vacuum.
Yeah, get the fluffy duster out and just wipe it down. Do what you got to do. Allow that reflection to be visible. I think that's that's a very good point you make there about the battle between the brain and the heart. And when you put it like that, the heart is the purer element, isn't it? And they just say like heart and soul. They don't say brain and soul, right? So I think that's I think that seems safer to say. It is a little bit of another one of those little airy ones, because like at least the brain, you can say, is where the sort of computer of consciousness lives, whereas the heart, technically speaking, is like an organ that just pumps blood around. It's not, we have all these symbolic ideas about what the heart represents, but those symbols are where the whole, like, that's where the truth comes from, I suppose, or is how it's expressed more accurately. And the heart is like a mirror. I'm happy with that one. I want to have to. That might be one of those ones I go around reminding myself of down the line.
I do not need to remind myself how fun the Kiwi Ferns are, and little teaser, how fun the Wellington Phoenix are. We'll touch on the Wellington Phoenix in a jiffy, but the Kiwi Ferns, they had a fantastic win over Australia. It was a 6-12 win. 12 points for the Kiwi Ferns, 6 points for Australia. And this is like real interesting because after the loss to Australia in Townsville a few weeks ago, I did write about it as a really impressive, gritty performance from the Kiwi Ferns in a loss. And I just felt the need to get that message across in a deep dive for our website, theniche-cage.com. So I was obviously overjoyed when that was parlayed into a win over Australia. And in both games, the Kiwi Ferns conceded no points in the second half. So the reason it was a gritty loss against Australia was because the Kiwi Ferns won the second half. They scored a try, Australia scored no points. Then you come into this game in Melbourne where the Kiwi Ferns conceded no points in the second half. Australia's try came in the 9th minute. They didn't score any more points after that. And then Mele Hofunga scored late in the first half, and Leanne Tofunga scored the winning try in the second half. Again, drawing parallels between the two games up in Townsville, the Kiwi Ferns, part of that loss was all the adversity they had to face, injuries, HIAs, players playing all sorts of different positions and not conceding a point in the second half. What happens in this win? Racing McGregor, 15 minutes off for an HIA. That's all good. You can cover that because Ash Quinlan plays in the halves for NRLW. So she comes into the halves. And what actually happened was McGregor came back on the field. Quinlan goes to dummy half. So then Brooke Anderson, who was the dummy half, she moves to lock. So the Kiwi Ferns were playing with Georgia Hale and Brooke Anderson as their middle forwards, both of whom are mobile tackling machines and good passers. So how do the Kiwi Ferns defend their try line over and over and over again against the apparently best team in the world? Players like Georgia Hale and Brooke Anderson, even when Brooke Anderson's at dummy half, they both get across the park really well, and they are brutal tacklers. Like, they just show up for every single tackle without any question of where they're at. But they also pass the ball really well. Georgia Hale is the best passing middle forward in the world, and Brooke Anderson is a dummy half. So she can pass. That enables the Kiwi Ferns to shift the footy, as they did in their try for Tafunga. And they've also, Hufunga's try was another example of the funky Kiwi Ferns shape. In all their games this year, the last few weeks, they've been able to execute a set play or two or three. There's been a couple of variations for Hufunga's tries, and they've been able to just have a plan, do the plan, and it's really good coaching. If you've got a good defensive team and you're able to execute your attacking plays with precision, that's good coaching. And I think Giancarlo Italiano, along with Andrew Webster, those are two signatures of their team's performances. Warriors this year, Phoenix over the last few weeks, and now the Kiwi Ferns as well. The Kiwi Ferns, though, they also lost Mele Hufunga. She missed the last 15 minutes of that game. So the good thing about having 5 centers from the NRLW in this team is that when you lose a center, you've got plenty of options. So Shanice Parker, centre for the Newcastle Knights, back-to-back NRL champion, she moves from the right wing to left centre. And then I think it was Jasmine Fogovini, who was otherwise playing as a middle forward. She's played a bit of edge forward. She goes to right wing. And this is the versatility on offer, because initially when Hufunga left the field, Anessa Biddle, right edge forward, moves to left centre. And that was kind of crazy because you had Otessa Pule, Anessa Biddle, Leanne Tafunga, extremely powerful, and maybe all three are from Otara, because I think Otessa Pule is also from Otara. But that's not all that different from having Hufunga at left centre, because she's incredibly powerful. She's from around the corner in Mangere. So it's all quite similar there. That is to say, the Kiwi Ferns just absorbed that adversity, the positional changes, and stormed home. Australia couldn't do anything to score tries. The Kiwi Ferns snuffed out all the attacking opportunities. Fantastic goal line defense. I think RP Nichols made a big tackle with some of her homies on the left edge. RP Nichols threw the final pass for Tafunga's try. It was really fun to see the Kiwi Ferns win, and it caps off an extremely fun year of women's rugby league. Most of these players, Hufunga, Biddle, Abigail Roach. Abigail Roach is as good as any other women's rugby league player in the world. And Hufunga's a superstar. Let's get that out in the open. But Abigail Roach is as good as any other player in the world, because she's fast, she's a balanced runner, and she dominates tackles. She smashed a few of the Australian middle forwards, and then Jamie Chapman, the Australian winger, she's a big unit, but she moves incredibly well. She ran straight into Roach and came off second best. Roach, I compared Niall Williams-Guthrie to Steve Maddai, but Abigail Roach, I think, is a better comparison, because she genuinely rips into people when she tackles. her timing with just getting the shoulder in the tackle was impeccable, and she's so classy with the footy as well. So I loved her work. But a lot of those players were playing their first season of NRLW. They had immediate impacts in NRLW. They were among the best players in NRLW, and now that is evident in the Kiwi Ferns defeating Australia. Let alone the fact that your Dragons youngster, Alexis Tawaniai, best player for the Dragons this year, injured, unavailable for the Kiwi Ferns. And they also lost Amelia Pasakala in that game against Tonga, one of the best young forwards for the Roosters. And they were able to get this win kind of for her because she's got a lengthy layoff now. So I just love Kiwi Ferns Rugby League. And it's interesting because, like, the Blackcaps were playing Australia in the World Cup. Kiwis were playing Australia in the Pacific Championship. The team who needed a win, the team who desperately needed a win, this was their last crack, was the Kiwi Ferns, and they got it done. I'm not too fussed about the Kiwis. Like, they were subpar. They weren't at their best. It was it was the same as the Blackcaps. And we'll talk about, I don't think there's a lot to talk about for the Kiwis, but we will talk about the Blackcaps at the World Cup. It was the same thing. When you come up against Australia, that can happen. When you come up against Australia, David Warner's going to just try to smack you because you're a Kiwi. That's the Australian attitude. That's what happened for the Kangaroos against the Kiwis. But the team who needed a win was the Kiwi Ferns, and they dominated Australia, and it was beautiful. I loved it. Caps off a fantastic year for Women's Rugby League, and especially considering, the defensive mahi after the World Cup final. They only lost 8-10 in their pool game against Australia at the World Cup last year, I believe. Then they got 50 points put on them. Now they've got a win over Australia. Now they've got 2 games without conceding a point in the second half. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think they said it was 7 years since the Kiwi Ferns had last beaten Australia, so big deal there. Like, that's I don't know what do you know what the Kiwi fellas record is in terms of when they last beat Australia?
It was 2018.
Okay. So that's now the longer streak. It wasn't, but it now is. There was so much sport going on Saturday night. So this was overlapping, I think, with the Phoenix, and then the Kiwi fellas were on afterwards, and the Blackcaps were overlapping with all of it. And so I was having to do double screens, and so I wasn't paying full attention to everything. But I watched quite a bit of the Kiwi Ferns, and just like the defense throughout, the defense on the goal line, but the defense across the park, just unreal stuff. And especially unreal because often when you have to absorb that much pressure, it's like you almost have to accept that you're going to concede some points. It's like a bend don't break kind of mentality. But they gave up nothing after that early try, like nothing throughout the rest of the way. For as much as Australia threw at them, it was incredible stuff. And it's not like Australia just running like one outs up the middle every time. Like they were going through some stuff. There was that I think it was Uppy Nichols' tackle that you're talking about, where she like was part of there was a barge over and they held her up over the goal line, and like just incredible stuff. It's the individual hits, and it's also just the structure and all that. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that they'd been pummeled by this team in the World Cup final a year ago. Like, this is absolute redemption from that. I mean, maybe not absolute, because it's better to do it in a World Cup than it is in a sort of tri-series thing, but an incredible development from across 12 months. And that has come as we've seen that many more Kiwi players in the NRLW, and probably we'll see more as seasons progress. I mean, at some point in the next couple of years, and imagine we get a Warriors women's team back again. I got to imagine that's in the plans, and that's only, I mean, we've seen what that looks like with the Wellington Phoenix in the A-League when they got a women's team in there. Is suddenly you're like tripling the amount of Kiwi players who are available. probably won't be quite that substantial in the NRLW, but that's only because there's so many already established at Aussie clubs as it is. Like the progress made in the last 12 months is immense. Don't see why that progress ought to stop. Like I don't think this is the peak of that journey or anything. I think this is still working its way up the mountainside. You know what I mean?
I think that is most evident in how Anessa Biddle went from local footy in New Zealand to the best post-contact meter eater in the NRLW this year. This was Abigail Roach's first season of NRLW. Like, there's a lot of those players who are coming directly from Aotearoa and dominating NRLW. Alexis Toa-Niai was 18 years old in her first season dominating NRLW. So it's onwards and upwards. And this team does feel a lot stronger than the World Cup team. So I think that is a key nugget as well on the back of the NRLW season. I laid out some of the similarities between that and the Phoenix. But the most pressing similarity I can feel, and this is a key point, the feeling. I feel the same way about the Wellington Phoenix as I did watching the Warriors earlier this season. Where I'm watching them and I'm putting the pieces together. I'm like, oh, this is, they've got a few trick shots here. They've got some combinations brewing there. This is how they want to attack. They're getting the ball to the wide areas quickly. I'm always kind of annoyed watching football because you obviously wear grace with the camera angles and all of that, but the ball goes to a central midfielder and they just kick it back to where it came from. Like, bro, you got two players on the other sideline with no one within 20 meters of them. Just roll out, give it to them, off we go. That is all the Wellington Phoenix do, like especially Rufa in that midfield, but that's just my footballing expert analysis. But the Phoenix and the Warriors also have incredibly talented youngsters. And that was on show for the Phoenix, but it's just the feeling of like, I'm excited for these teams because I'm going to learn some shit about this sport. Whether it was rugby league with the Warriors, football with the Phoenix, I'm going to learn something. Like the Kiwi Ferns, Warriors and Phoenix have defensive grit. And they have really clear systems and plans in attack. Like when the Warriors were executing their shape, it was like, okay, they didn't hit that runner. They're not going to hit that runner, but they're going to hit this runner and he's going to score. Or they didn't hit this runner, they didn't hit this runner, they didn't hit this runner. Watane Zelezniak's going to score in the corner. Okay, Tohu Harris is going to the line with Fanua Blake. Fanua Blake's through the hole. Like you could just see all those things kind of happening, and I'm getting that same vibe from the Phoenix. And I'm curious to what you think about that. But first, would you rather have Paulson or Ollie Sale?
At this point, you got to say Alex Paulson, don't you? I mean, he's just that game laid it out relatively clearly. They've said like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I said this last week, but Italiano has spoken specifically of the difference between him and backup Jack Duncan, where Jack Duncan is like a solid A-League player. He gets a bit of criticism because he was in a bad Newcastle Jets team last year, but he's sort of like, the way I likened it when they signed him at first was, here is a guy who is league average. He's not the worst goalkeeper in the A-League. He's not the best goalkeeper in the A-League. If you look across the starting goalkeepers and their backups, he's somewhere in the middle. You know, he's about average, which means that if Alex Paulson plays better than him in preseason and earns the jersey, earns the gloves, I suppose, then he is a better than average goalkeeper. If he is worse than average, then you've got Duncan to carry to sort of carry the torch until Paulson's ready to go later on in the season or maybe next year. I don't think there was too much risk of Paulson being in the below average category coming into the season as much as anything, because I think he was going to get some benefit of the doubt as an academy player. one of their best academy players and the previous backup. It's just how this team has been operating. It would have been a bit weird if they gave Duncan the go, but you got to have someone like that to keep a guy like Paulson honest. And he's been spectacular in the first 2 weeks. I mean, even if he didn't save that penalty in the last minute of that Perth game, it still would have been spectacular. That's just the sort of the cherry on top. It's the big moment that gets to show everybody what a talent he is. But I mean, he's been excellent. His passing is very good. He's some of that stuff, you can see how the Phoenix is still learning and figuring out some of their passing patterns. It's not always that clinical, and it's not always quite as quick as it needs to be. There is one aspect where I think there's quite a lot of excitement there. We'll come back around to that when we get back to what you're saying initially there. But as far as Paulson goes, man, like his touch with his feet is good. He doesn't panic under pressure. There's a couple times where he's like stepped through challenges. He's the thing that's impressed me most, because I knew he was good with his feet. I've seen him play a lot for the reserves. I've seen him play for New Zealand age grade teams. I know he's good with his feet, and I know he's an excellent shot stopper. He's shown both those things. Didn't realize he was quite as good in the air as he has been. Like he's coming out and claiming, he's punching, he's doing all that stuff. He's commanding the area. Seems to be a pretty good communicator, which is one thing that Ollie Sale was always excellent at. Whether people listen to him or not, I don't know. There's evidence that maybe they didn't do enough of that, because that team defensively certainly had some lapses last couple of years. But Sale at his best, and there was some diminishing returns. His first season was really good. That was the year where he nudged Marinovic out. Second season, solid. He held it down. Third season, a few mistakes crept in. Probably would have bounced back and been fine fourth season, but also you sort of know where his level is, and he wasn't going to get better than that. It was like you sort of knew the goalkeeper he is, whereas Paulson is 21 years old and improving and is already excellent. Like, I think it's too early to say, because you got to get more than 2 games under your belt. But I just compare him to Ollie Sale. I don't know there's too many goalkeepers across the A-League who you take ahead of Paulson, particularly when you start factoring in less about like where they are right now, and more like the including into that equation the what do you call it, like the prospects of how good he can get, how much further he has to develop. He's good, man. We knew he was fantastic. I saw him a couple of years ago when he was playing regularly for the reserves, thinking like, this is as good a goalkeeper as I've seen coming through the ranks for his age. And this is what it starts to look like when a guy like that breaks through into first team football.
Yeah, like a few more, like I'm learning. The good thing about talking through these things is you mentioned some terms and they like solidify the idea, like the passing patterns. That's coaching, and that starts when like Paulson's got the ball at the back. Because I was watching, I'm like, Perth aren't really going to pass the ball to Ollie Sale, but every Phoenix player knows they can pass the ball to Paulson under pressure, and whether it's the passing patterns coming out of that area, or the passing patterns that we did see in the first round as well, with some of the one-touch passing into space, that is good coaching. And the defense as well, like a well-organized defense, that's good coaching. That's what we saw with the Warriors. That's what we saw with the Kiwi Ferns. It's just good, solid coaching, evident in how these teams play. What do you make of that Warriors-Phoenix comparison? Because I'll set it up for you even further. Paulson, Lucas Kelly-Heald, the 2 dudes who came off the bench for their debuts, Gillian
and Hughes.
Like, what did the Warriors youngsters do this season? They look comfortable at that level, and there's plenty more coming in to replace Josh Cohen and the rest of them. Like, I think Lucas Kelly-Heald, he played 90 minutes, I think, and like he was just bursting up and down the sideline. So when it comes to a brain fade to give up the penalty with the handball situation, that's understandable. That's a young player who's under fatigue at that moment. That's all good.
That's effectively what Chiefy said afterwards in his press conference too.
But he is a freaky talent. He's Kyle
His twin
Jamison.
brother's also a goalkeeper for the reserve team, so they
He's
might have
Kyle
had one of
Jamison.
those like mental crossover things going on there.
He's Kyle Jamison at left back. He's a freaky talent. Ali Leotawa, freaky talent. Leka Halasima, freaky talent. These aren't normal youngsters. These dudes are phenoms of their sport. So what do you make of like how you've seen the Wellington Phoenix play their footy this season after 2 games? Thinking back to everything we talked about with the Warriors throughout the season.
Yeah, well, I think there's the Josh Curran thing's quite interesting because that's exactly what the Phoenix have been doing. Is like we're not going to re-sign someone like Josh Laws because we want that sort of position to be taken up by Finn Sermon. It's like you've had this solid Australian dude holding it down, good player, not a great player, but a good player. And he's gone on. He's playing now for Grasshopper Zurich in Switzerland, which is an ex-club of Nando Peineke and Max Mata. One of the several clubs that several teams that those two have played for together at some point. Need to get Peineke to Shrewsbury Town in the off season. That's clearing the path not to replace him with another similar talent, but to allow a young guy to step up into a bigger role. And just having those little spots on the fringes where it's like, we don't need to have a backup player there because we trust that the guys we're developing further down in the grades are good enough to be able to do a job. It's not in every minute. It's not in every like an 80-minute kind of performance, 90-minute kind of performance for either of them. But it's coming in, doing a little roll off the bench and see how it goes. And if you do well enough, you earn more opportunities on top of that, sure. But you got to start somewhere, and that's starting, for example, for someone like a Warriors junior back rower is getting 20-30 minutes off the bench like Josh Curran had been doing. Maybe not even every week, just every couple of weeks. Someone else is injured or suspended, there's your opportunity to move onto the bench in a smaller role as everyone moves up. Like that's something where it feels like the Warriors have just done something the Phoenix have been doing a lot of, maybe questionably too much of. You could make that argument, because I do think the one aspect where it doesn't quite line up is that the Warriors have a lot of players. Well, I mean, just look at the team they had last year. They have a lot of players who were playing the best footy of their careers, not because it was their second season and they were bursting through a little bit more, but because NRL veterans who are playing their best stuff. Don't see that kind of player in the Wellington Phoenix team.
Costa, Savada.
Savada, yes.
Like I actually
Costa, no. Like Costa's not going to play his best footy. He's 33 or 34. He's an older leader who's going to hold it down and do some nice things, but he's not going to be one of the best players in the A League at his position. David Ball's the same.
Tim Brown. Tim Payne. Sorry, not Tim Brown. Tim Payne.
Tim Brown.
T-Pain. T-Pain.
There's a good legacy of Tims at the Phoenix, It's
but just
speak more. There's any Tims in the academy though.
Speak more about the youngsters for the Phoenix that we saw against Perth, because Kelly Hill played the whole game. Finn Sermon was great at centre back, and some of the lads made their debuts off the bench.
Yeah, so there's the main difference, I think, is that the Warriors are ready to win and compete at this present moment. The Phoenix, I think, it's not that they can't do that. It's just that if they do, they have to rely on those players. The Warriors aren't in a position where like Leka Halasima has to come in and be one of their better players for them to win, right? The Phoenix do. They need a bit of that from Sermon and Paulson, etc.
But those lads were good against Perth. Speak about their performance.
Against Perth, against Western Sydney as well. I think Paulson and Sermon have been their two best players so far. I think they're spectacular, but it's also there's so many of the academy dudes playing at the moment. But that's like,
tell us about
how many academy guys have we had debut so far? Because there were none last year. There were two on the weekend. Fergus Gillian and Isaac Hughes. There was Finn Conchi off the bench a week before, plus Lucas Kelly Heald. I think that's four. I don't know if there was another one or not. There might have been. But we're basically already matched the last 2 years combined with academy debutants. And that was going to happen because they've made it a priority. But yeah, like Sermon, I think, was someone who he played a lot the year before last because there were a lot of injuries and they were sort of tested. He just got thrust into a position before he was necessarily the obvious progression for him, but he did pretty well. And then he didn't play much last year. And I keep seeing people like he even got asked about this in a press conference about like, was it disappointing not to play that much? And I'm thinking, well, he's yes, of course it's going to be disappointing for him not to play that much, but that was just reverting to where he would have been expected to be. He played more than expected the year before. He wasn't going to repeat that. It was they didn't have the same injuries, but he spent a year just like Paulson, having tasted A League previously, getting hardly anything to go by the next year, but just like sitting back, growing, learning, developing, and just getting mentally ready to say like, no, I want this. I'm ready for this. This opportunity when it comes back around again, I'm taking that. And they've both been fantastic. Finn Sermon just wins headers after header after header after header. He captained the under 20s at the most recent World Cup earlier this year. He's a leader. He's a great defender. Again, someone who, as soon as you see him in the reserves, he looked like a guy who had high caliber potential. But unlike Paulson, who was just pretty good straight away, Sermon was like, remember his first season playing regularly reserves, he had like scored 2 own goals, had a red card like, across the season. He was prone to big mistakes, partly just because he was a big player. He goes into tackles, he gets involved, he gets stuck in. He's eyeing that stuff out now. He just looks like one of the better defenders in the A League. I think he's been better than Scott Wooden. His performances have benefited from having the experience of Scott Wooden there. So Wooden gets credit for some of Sermon's stuff. But Sermon's been every bit as good as Paulson throughout these first 2 weeks. And those two are now just locked on A League starters. They're academy guys, but they're just first team players now. They're not emerging players. They're good to go,
I am going to just try rein you in here a bit just to focus in on some of these youngsters. You did a nice job of describing what Finn Sermon's good at, and I do find it interesting that a really good Phoenix defense has Alex Paulson at goalie, Finn Sermon at centre back, and Lucas Kelly-Heald at left back. I'm actually going to take over for the Lucas Kelly-Heald analysis here.
Please do.
Those really tall players, everything just looks better. I think the best example of this right now is Marco Jansen for South Africa. When he's bowling, when he's fielding, he's a great catcher. He always fields at slip for South Africa, I think. He effortlessly hits sixes with the bat. You could say the same about Kyle Jamieson, but he's not doing that type of stuff at the highest level right now. So we'll use Marco Jansen as an example. Kelly-Heald, he just looks like he gets more whip on the ball. It looks like he's a good defender because anytime you're that tall, you need to be able to move to play sport, and he's mobile enough to play professional football, so he's a mover. But he's a big unit, so he's tough to get around. I think the Perth goal came I did think because Beavers, maybe the Perth guy, he was behind Kelly-Heald to get the header. I was like, Kelly-Heald, bro, just don't even need to jump, just get your head on the ball. What are you doing? So there were a few kind of lapses like that, but players of that stature, everything just looks better. When he's chasing the ball in space, he gets there pretty quick because his strides are 5 meters long. Everything just looks a little bit better, a little bit more powerful. And it never feels like he's out of control of the ball because he's so tall, so long that he can always get the ball back. Those things just look a little bit better. And I continue to be impressed by him. But just speak on the 2 debutants off the bench. What roles did they play? Because again, Finn Sermon, he's been the centre back the whole time. Alex Paulson, he's been the goalie the whole time. Kelly-Heald's been left back the whole time. We did see Finn Conchi, as you said, in the previous game. What roles? I keep feeling the other guy, Gillian and
Isaac Hughes.
Yeah. So what role did you see them come off the bench to play against Perth?
Well, just quickly on Kelly-Heald, because yeah, he played both the Aussie Cup games as well, so he's had a run at left back. He's not just he's not one of these other guys who's making a quick debut. Like he's been set up as their left back throughout preseason, and that's really interesting because Sam Sutton has been injured, and Sam Sutton, like others before him, he's had a get in where you fit in approach to first team football. He was a midfielder, like a proper midfielder. He could play the Joe Bell kind of deeper playmaker role, or he could push forward and be an attacking midfielder. Um, Before he got to this level, now then he sort of got converted into a left back for the Phoenix. I wonder if that might change now. I wonder if we might start to see Sutton used a lot more in an attacking sense, even as a left winger, for example. Now that Kelly Hild's locked it down at left back, who was a bit more of a specialist. He can play left back, he can play centre back, but he's definitely a defender.
Either
And yeah,
either way, he's going to play left centre back, right? Because he is left footed.
yeah, he would be the left-sided centre back, yeah, which is where Wooden has been playing. Which wasn't always the case last year because Josh Laws was the left-footed centre back. So he would, if Laws played, he'd be on the left side. If Payne played, Payne would probably be on the right. But I think Payne did play left side sometimes. It's a sort of mix and match approach. But it is, yeah, depending on your strategies and what you want to achieve with your build-up play. Sometimes that matters. Sometimes it doesn't matter. The left or right-footed centre back thing. I think we. Because it's not just that Kelly Hild's done well there, it's also that the Knicks do have a little bit of a need for a left-footed attacker. I'm trying to think who they like. Ben Old, yes, but he's been managed through injury so far. Although really nice cameo off the bench, like he's set up that he didn't get the assist, but he set up that second goal with his little sliding intercept to start it. Just the energy he brought off the bench was real nice. Yeah, I wonder if that's something we'll see when Sam Sutton comes back into contention next week or down the line or whenever it is that he's going to be fit and available. Is we might see him being used a bit more as a bit more further forward now that Kelly Hield has shown himself to be a very capable A-League left back to date. As for these debutants that we've had so far, like Finn Conchie is now injured. He's not going to feature for the next. I think potentially up to a month out. He's got a muscle injury, which isn't ideal. He was probably the best player for the under-20s at the World Cup. If it wasn't him, it was Finn Sermon. Good, like solid ball-winning midfielder, but in particular ball-playing midfielder who also set up a couple goals from there. So he's an exciting player. Isaac Hughes, centre back, has been captaining I think he captained the reserves last year. He might have even captained the reserves on the weekend. The funny thing is, Fergus Gillian and Isaac Hughes both got A-League debuts off the bench. Both had played off the bench as well in the Aussie Cup game. So it wasn't their club debuts, but it was their A-League debuts, which is kind of the one that matters. Like, Aussie Cup stuff isn't nearly as important. Hughes, good centre back, just a solid centre back.
Did Hughes play centre back against Perth?
He came on to make it a back three, yes. They sort of went a bit more defensive to hold on in those latter stages. So yeah, he did come on and play his normal centre back role. Fergus Gillian came on and played his normal midfield role. Fergus Gillian, fun fact about him is, I'm pretty sure this is true. I don't know how many other Gillians will be going around, but I think this is right. His brother is Liam Gillian, who plays for Auckland City as a winger. And their sister is Emily Gillian, who plays for, I think, Fencibles, but is currently playing for Eastern Suburbs and also the New Zealand futsal team at the moment. Yeah, so, rather talented family there. Gillian and Hughes played debuts off the bench and then went and played for the reserves the next day as well. So busy weekend for those lads. As did Oscar Van Hatten, returning from injury as well, scored a penalty for the reserves in their game.
See, the beautiful thing is here, I mentioned the defensive unit. We chucked in Hughes, he's another defender.
Yep.
You've got Gillian and Conchie as midfielders or attackers, but you've also got Ben Old, who consistently impacts A-League games coming off the bench. He's done it for a season and a bit now, I reckon.
Yep.
As you said, Sam Sutton, local junior. You've also got Oscar Van Hatten, local junior as well. Like, there's local juniors, or as the Fiend, like, semantics here. Warriors, it's all about local juniors, and that Phoenix is all about academy players. But the Phoenix have youngsters from Aotearoa in every kind of positional bracket. And those dudes, they seem pretty talented. So it's and I think that was all on show against the Perth Glory in a win. So it's happy times for the Phoenix, and we'll keep track of that as we did with the Warriors, just learning every week about how they're operating, how they play their footy, how they go about their mahi.
Well, just one last point on that, because remember the Warriors. I think I was going to say this before, but I forgot to. We were talking around it. The Warriors under Andrew Webster, they didn't show their full bag in week 1, did they? You know, that was something that it wasn't until sort of midway through the season you started getting those Watane-Zelezniak hat tricks every second week, and it took them they were grinding out results from the very beginning, but it took them a while to get into the full stride of what they were trying to achieve. Like, you just get a little bit better each week, a little bit more familiar with the system. You're able to do a few more things. We're at the very early stages of that with the Wellington Phoenix. So I think that's something to be quite excited about, is they've shown big progress from their first Aussie Cup games to what we saw against Perth. A long way to go, and they want to be making the finals, because this is a tough competition. There's plenty of good teams, but that is something that we can hopefully look forward to, especially when you're thinking about the fact that, like, the one obvious weakness in their games, in these 2 games so far, is they're not creating a lot of chances. That's not really any different to what they did last season, but there is that hope that they're going to get better and better as they do that, because they're going to get more familiar and they're going to improve under the new coach, under the new system, etc., as the Warriors did.
To be fair, the Blackcaps are also in this kind of wider context that we're connecting between these teams, because the Blackcaps just play good cricket. That's what they do. They played less good cricket against Australia. However, the Blackcaps, as these good teams do, they made it a contest. And again, comparing it to the White Ferns struggle because they don't make it a contest. And some of these other teams, England, in this World Cup, under the pump, they crumble. The Blackcaps were under the pump, just to put it lightly.
And then some, yeah.
What were they for the first wicket? 175 in the 20th over before David Warner was dismissed by the one and only G. Philly, the Glenn Phillips, bowling maestro. Hold that thought. The Blackcaps clawed their way back into that innings. And 388 wasn't the worst target to chase down, and they actually ended up bowling Australia out. So not only did you not concede 500 runs, which was a possibility at one stage, you also bowled Australia out.
Like genuinely was a possibility at one stage, not an exaggeration.
I've had to double take myself in my brain a few times. You're like 388, but it could have been worse. Can it be worse than 308? Yeah, it definitely can be worse.
Yeah, it could
have. But somehow the Blackcaps just stayed in the contest. They did their best to keep it a competitive target, and then they made a run chase out of it. They lost that run chase, but they made it a run chase with Rachin Ravindra hitting a big Donny century. Daryl Mitchell and James Neesham, Jimmy Neesham scored half centuries as well. It was a bit traumatic given what happened in the last World Cup final with some of those moments. But again, depending on what happens in the remaining games, the Blackcaps didn't necessarily need to win that game. So it's all good. The best performers in the game were the 2 youngest Blackcaps, Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra. And despite a couple of no balls, yeah, Matt Henry bowled a couple of no balls that were then smacked to the boundary for
2 in a row.
Free hit maximums. The Blackcaps, so Afghanistan and Sri Lanka both have played 5 games. Every other team's played 6 games. And as in accordance with your extras table, the Blackcaps are still at the bottom of the percentage of runs Is it the extras of as a percentage of the total? Is that it?
Yeah, extras as a percentage of the total runs against them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So they 2.4%. They're the only team below 3%. That's impressive, even more so
well,
considering what
I think
happened.
they gave up more runs in this game, so the percentage wasn't damaged so much. You gave up more extras, but you also gave up more runs. Are they still
Well,
top of the overalls as well?
uh, what do you mean overalls?
As in like fewest
Yeah,
total
fewest.
extras.
So 38, they're the only team below 50.
Damn.
So again,
Still
like,
pretty good.
this is Blackcaps Cricket 101. We could link it to everything else. This is good coaching. This is discipline. This is controlling what you can control. The Blackcaps are the only team to concede less than 50 extras, and they are the only team conceding less than 3% extras of the total, if I said that correctly. Either way, couple no balls, couple wides, didn't impact the Blackcaps' overall extra tally in this game. But again, Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra are the best players, the two of the youngest players. And we talked about it in the first game because it was all about the Blackcaps having part-time bowlers. It was Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra, the part-timers. But I've got this idea where both of them have been brewed for this moment. When you, I think you said on Thursday how Rachin Ravindra had spent time in India. He's done that many times. He's done that as a teenager. He's done that as a senior player. Maybe as frequently as earlier this year. I thought
there was one earlier this year. That was the one I read about.
So basically, since he was a teenager, maybe 12, 13, he's gone back to India to play and train cricket. And Rachin Ravindra, he's this new Blackcaps World Cup wizard. Where did he make his test debut? It was in India. So if there's one bloke who's ready to play cricket in India, it is the Kiwi Indian who spent a lot of time playing cricket in India, Rachin Ravindra, who has... Again, comparing the White Ferns, Rachin Ravindra, he has hit Plunket Shield hundreds. He has smashed Super Smash sixes. He has bowled the most overs for Wellington in every format in certain seasons. Everything about Rachin Ravindra's journey to this moment is designed for this type of performance at a World Cup. You can say the same thing about Glenn Phillips. Because Glenn Phillips... We talked about it a few years ago. He started bowling. And he's the best fielder in the team, the most exciting cricketer in the world. Then he starts bowling. And what happens when Glenn Phillips starts bowling? He's pretty good. And he's been pretty good in different tournaments. The CPL, county cricket, domestic cricket in Aotearoa. Glenn Phillips is... He's always been a factor, not always, he's consistently been a factor with the ball over the last 3 years. And I'm going to, he's been, fantastic bowling this year. Glenn Phillips, the bowler, the off spinner, oh my God. Glenn Phillips is averaging 28.6 as an ODI bowler this year. That is slightly worse than 27.6 last year. So Glenn Phillips was pretty good bowling in ODIs last year. 2 years of ODI bowling, he's averaging 27 and 28, below 30. That's pretty good. He's got a career list day bowling average of 35, career T20 bowling average of 30, first class 41. I mean, let me pull up Mitchell Santner's first class bowling average because I don't think it's much better than Glenn Phillips. Mitchell Santner, first class bowling, 44. Glenn Phillips has a lower first class average with the ball than Mitchell Santner. He's good at bowling. He's good at cricket. He's good at sport. He's just a good athlete. He's a fantastic talent. Do you have anything to add about, because I think that's the main storyline. I don't think the Blackcaps will worry too much about this game. keep it moving, need some wins, get into the semi-finals, anything can happen. The best performers in this game were the youngest players in the team, in the squad. Essentially, the only players under 30, which again isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You can be as old as you want playing for the teams as long as you perform. But the dudes who made this a contest against the Aussies were the youngest. And the dudes who impressed for the Wellington Phoenix were the youngsters. The ladies who, helped the Kiwi Ferns defeat Australia were the youngsters. What did you make of Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra against Australia?
Yeah, Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra, aka Finn Sermon and Alex Paulson. Glenn Phillips is just the point you made there that stands out is Glenn Phillips is just good. He's an athlete. I think he'd be good at any sport he tried. He's one of those types of fellas.
I reckon Glenn Phillips, number 6 in the league. Glenn Phillips. Let's go second 5 in rugby union. Glenn Phillips, point guard. Not for the Breakers, but we'll go...
Well, he wouldn't play for the Breakers, but chuck him on like Melbourne or something. He can be Shirley's backup.
Yeah, there we go.
I reckon he'd do all right as a sort of ball-winning midfielder as well in football, or maybe a attacking fullback overlapping and swinging in some crosses. You know what? Probably could do a pretty good Cam Devlin impersonation for the Phoenix if they wanted to go back down that pathway, Like the thing with his averages is he doesn't bowl nearly the volume of those other guys. So, but then that's still, how valuable is that? Is to have it says you have a part-time bowler who can take wickets. Like, it's not just someone who's there to help you get through a bowling change at one end or something, or fill in some overs because you got the mathematics a little bit wrong, or someone got injured, which by the way happened in this game, didn't it? Because Lockie Ferguson only bowled 3 overs and then now is having scans on a potential injury, which I think we all knew that was probably coming at some point, the Lockie Ferguson injury scare, right? During a World Cup when he's playing, he didn't play the first game and then he's played every game since. It sort of felt like maybe they could have rotated him a little bit more and managed that workload. But then you also need the wins on the board if you want to make the knockouts. And I don't think the knockouts are in any threat. In a weird way, their knockouts chances might have even improved from this defeat because the way other results are going is... it kind of looks like the top 4 might be set. And unfortunately, it looks like Australia will be part of that top 4 now that they've beaten us. But because the Blackcaps made it such a chase, they maintained a pretty significant net run rate advantage over Australia. So that even though they're on the same points right now, and even though Australia beat the Blackcaps are ahead of them on net run rate, which is good. That's actually potentially the kind of thing that can be the difference between finishing 4th and 5th and making the semis or not. So the Blackcaps are still in a pretty good spot. The fact that everyone else is losing a lot of games means they might only need 5 wins, which means one of the next 3 beat Sri Lanka or Pakistan or South Africa and they're through. 2 of the next 3 wins and they're definitely through. There's no way a team from outside that is making it through. I think England actually is already mathematically eliminated. So... lols. The weird thing about that game is that I kind of don't think the first, obviously the first 20 odd overs or whatever it was horrendous, like worst case scenario. I'm not even sure that's what cost them the game, because I kind of think they fought back and leveled that out. It's what cost them in the end was that was it Pat Cummins, I think, and also Josh Inglis, but in particular Pat Cummins, because he's a bowler who shouldn't be doing that to us, smacking 6s all over the place with a quick fire 30 odd, just as it looked like we might keep them around 360 and then they get to 380 plus, and we would have got anything under 380 the way that chase went, thanks to Rachin Ravindra with one of the a legendary innings. If we'd won that, we'd be talking about that as one of the great Blackcaps World Cup performances. He was unreal in that. Where did this dude come from? We knew the pedigree of Ravindra coming up. Like he's been given opportunities at a younger age than most players of his generation at this current time in Blackcaps because they know how good he is and how good he can be. But it's just I don't know. He'd had a few opportunities and had shown potential, but here he is. It's like there's no more potential. It's just this is one of the better ODI batters in the world now. This dude just has exploded at this World Cup, and he's incredible. Like the way he batted was fantastic, and like that because that was Glenn Phillips's best bowling figures, 3 for something something. The incredible thing about that is not just that he broke the partnership, like it was Glenn Phillips who did that. That he ended up with his best thing is that Matt Henry was getting destroyed. Lockie Ferguson, you don't even notice the fact he got injured and only bowled 3 overs because he might not have bowled again anyway. He was getting murdered. He was going for over 12s as well. Even Trent Bolt was getting copped. He less so than others because Trent Bolt's still Trent Bolt and he was able to hold it down and also bring it back later on, coming back and getting some wickets towards the end. But he still went for like what 7.5. I think he got 3 for 77 off his 10, something like that. All these Mitchell Santner got smashed. Rachin Ravindra, you expect him to get a little bit smashed because he's not necessarily someone who's going to keep the run rate down yet. He's a younger bowler figuring that out, but he got through some valuable overs. Neesham did bowl at the death, so I'm not going to blame him for getting smashed the way he got smashed because that's difficult. But he still got smashed, and Neesham does often go for high run rates and good strike rates is kind of his thing. He'll get smashed, but he might take a wicket or two. And he did get a wicket in this game. That's what he does. Everyone was getting smashed except Glenn Phillips. It's not just that he took wickets, it's that he was the only guy they couldn't get a hold of. It was so weird. It's like, what am I watching here? But I don't know. I just think there's a lot to be said for he's clearly the least skilled of those bowlers. Like he's the off spinner. He doesn't bowl variations or anything like that. There's a lot to be said for just having a dude in your team who can come in and bowl some flat, skiddy offies. You know, sometimes they're really hard to get under, and you can see that because he got a caught and bowled with one of his wickets. And also, how often has he been hitting stumps too? I think there has been a bit of that. Like, there seems to be quite a few bowlers getting clean bowled during this tournament. Batters getting clean bowled during this tournament, and the English cricket team seemed to be the worst at it. They had 6 guys getting bowled and out bowled in the loss against India. But Glenn Phillips did that to Joe Root, didn't he? He bowled him earlier on in the tournament, and he bowled Warner or Smith or someone. He bowled someone in this. I don't know. He's just chipping in with valuable cricketing things, and I guess that's Glenn Phillips for you, isn't it? That's what he does. Is he just whatever he does it well.
Yeah, you mentioned like Glenn Phillips bowling flat off spin. I think it's less about the skill he execute or what he does, and it's more about Glenn Phillips, the competitor. Glenn Phillips, he's the most energetic player in the World Cup, to be honest. Like we've talked about his fielding and his how enjoyable and entertaining he is to watch. That's because he plays with so much energy. He plays with a fizz. He plays with like it's competitiveness, but it's also energy and just
he just loves playing cricket. I get the feeling, eh? It's like he's going to make the most of everything.
So I think it's less about him, what he does, like what he's bowling, and more the fact that he is Glenn Phillips. And if Glenn Phillips is bowling, he's going to give it a crack. However he needs to do it, he might need to bowl full tosses to catch people on the boundary. Whatever he's going to do to be in that competitive battle, he's going to do it. And if you're in a competitive battle with Glenn Phillips, you better be like having 10 coffees to match his energy, because he's coming out fizzed up to like Glenn Phillips in the Phoenix, he's going to have a crack. Glenn Phillips in the Kiwis, he's going to rip in. Glenn Phillips in the NBL, he's going to be shooting, he's going to be dribbling, he's going to be doing everything. That is who Glenn Phillips is, and you can see it with the way he bats, the shots he plays, but also in the field. The catches he takes, or there were a few drop catches, so it wasn't the best fielding effort from the Blackcaps, but the intent he plays with is top notch, and I think that is his greatest skill set as a cricketer. Do you want to?
Glenn Phillips, the basketballer, is definitely taking charges, by the way. That's absolutely happening. He's one of those dudes who's going to plant the feet and absorb the contact from like the biggest guy on the other team running straight at him.
Like, I don't know how tall Glenn Phillips is, but he's going to dunk.
Springs.
He,
He'll be leaping.
He'll be dunking. Like, I don't know if he can actually dunk, but he'll try. He'll definitely try. And considering what I've seen him do on a cricket field, I think Glenn Phillips can dunk. How about that? Do you want to touch on Joseph Parker? He had a win on the undercard of the Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou bout, and I did have a little chuckle because like there were a lot of celebrities there, and I was like, well, obviously they're all paid to be there by the host nation who would do anything to look cool. And I was like, well, Novak Djokovic is at the World Cup final, Rugby World Cup final. Oh, there's Roger Federer at the Rugby World Cup final. Like, there was some Sophie Turner was carrying out the trophy with Dan Carter. Like, there was some celebrities at the Rugby World Cup final, and they would have been reimbursed. Like, obviously, we don't know how the upper echelons of society operate, but they would have been reimbursed for their travels and their troubles. But they would have been there because they also wanted to be there, not because the Saudi government kind of bribed them to be there. So the whole situation of that Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou fight was a bit weird, just considering who hosted it and what they are up to as a nation in the sporting landscape and the human rights and all that other stuff. But what's relevant to us is that Joseph Parker fought on the undercard and he had a win. What did you make of Joseph Parker's performance? What did you think? Because I don't like the other topics we have on the radar today, Plunket Shield, National League, like these are things we can check in with throughout the week. I don't think we're going to be talking anything about Joseph Parker for the next few weeks, next few months until he has another fight. But like, I didn't even know he was fighting on this card.
I found out when I saw the highlight of his knockout, like at halftime of the Rugby World Cup final. I think it might have been. I was flicking through my phone and saw, hey, Joseph Parker's fighting, and someone else was there watching with like, yeah, he's on the undercard of the Tyson Fury. Okay, used to me.
Can you like offer any context to that performance? Where this puts Joseph Parker? Anything you learned from the fight, just to help us digest Joseph Parker's victory over some geezer?
Some geezer called Simon Keane. Let me check what his box rec says. He's a 34-year-old Canadian heavyweight. Stands 1.96 meters, so a bit taller than Parker, as is the case with a lot of these fellas. He was 23-2, or 23-1, because the second one was Parker knocking him out. So he's a dude who's got a little bit of, not upper echelon, but he's got a little bit of pedigree. Beat Shaundell Winters, Eric Molina, a few of these guys that might have some crossover. But Parker smashed him. Knocked him out in the third round and seemed relatively comfortable in doing so. I guess from Parker's perspective, it's just kind of like a keep busy fight. It was 5 months after he beat Django Opelu, and he also fought Jack Massey in January. So this was his third fight of the year. When was the last time he fought 3 in 1 year? 2021, he did that as well, but 2 of those were rematches against Derek Chisora. So he could potentially sneak in another one because that wasn't too tricky, but I think 3 per year is probably a nice little benchmark. He's often said that he feels like he's better when he fights more often. So that's kind of the impression I got from this, is that this is Parker trying to stay busy and make sure he gets opportunities to show what he's working on and to put his training into some kind of perspective. And it was a fight that he should have always won against Simon Keane, and it's a fight that he did win, and he won it relatively emphatically, because I believe that's 2 KOs in a row, isn't it? And generally speaking with Parker, 2 knockouts in a row. Generally speaking with Joseph Parker, he knocks out the weak opponents and he grinds out the better ones, and he loses to the very best ones. That's kind of how his career has gone the whole way through. So Simon King probably ranks as one of his better knockouts, to be fair. Like in terms of the caliber of opponent that he's put on the turf, particularly because he did it quite early as well. So yeah, I don't know. He's keeping busy and he's racking up some highlights. I guess that's all you could really ask for a fight in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Where I don't know if you seen this stuff about, because you know how they spent billions and billions of dollars on buying footballers um for their leagues recently, and some of that was rather sneaky because you know there's some cross. There's the American dude who's front and center of the new ownership group of Chelsea, but apparently a lot of that money comes from like there's a lot of Saudi investment within that ownership group as well. And what did Chelsea do when they needed to offload a whole bunch of overpaid, underperforming players? They sold them all to Saudi Arabian clubs. So there's some dodgy stuff there, even amongst the obvious dodgy stuff. They've been getting no crowds. Like they've, other than maybe Ronaldo's games, like there's games with legit ex Premier League players out there and playing in front of like a couple hundred people, making the Wellington Phoenix A League crowds look like Warriors crowds. Which, hey, like give it a couple months, maybe they will look like that. But right now, no. But they're still towering above the figures that Saudi Arabia seems to be getting, which just goes to show that they're spending money because they got money rather because it's not exactly like for the people. You know what I mean?
We're not here to discuss that stuff. We're just here to
Global
discuss
politics? No, we'll leave that. We'll park
Aotearoa
that one.
sport. Apart from the half Pakeha, half Palangi Bloods and Crips that battle it out on the election front. But the Plunkett Shield cricketers playing at the moment. Henry Nichols hit 100, a couple of other good performances. Ashok took 7 wickets. Christian Clark for the Northern District took a few wickets as well. We do have a couple minutes here if you want to throw out any National League standout bits and bobs from the weekend. Anything top of mind?
I mean, Auckland City won again, so they're 6-0. That keeps happening. I don't know. I've only watched about half the game, so I'm a little early. But I, do you remember the other week when I was talking about Lewis Toomey, ex Wellington Phoenix attacking midfielder who's now playing for Eastern Suburbs? He played against the Wellington Phoenix on the weekend, scored a couple goals, involved, didn't get assists, but like involved earlier in the moves for a couple of their other ones in a 5-3 win, which is a weird result. I don't know. I just remember you saying like you asked a question that hovered in my head as I was watching them play this week. Is he too good for the National League? And I was thinking at the time, like, you know, we'll just give it a couple of weeks. Let's see how it goes. I'm ready to make an assessment on that and say, yes, he's too good for the National League. And if he's still playing in 2024 domestic footy, then those overseas scouts have done him dirty, or maybe his agent's done him dirty or something there, because the dude's ready to spread his wings overseas. He did have a little stint with in a sort of lower league Finland club after he first left the Phoenix before he came back. So bit of experience there. I would have him high on the list of players because every year it's not always the ones you expect as well. Sometimes it's guys who don't play that much but are younger and ready to go. There's always a few players who go and get overseas gigs on the back of National League. One of them was from last year was Corbin Piper, who's just wrapped up his first season in the Irish second division with Wexford, where he was basically playing every week, gone from Birkenhead to Wexford. They were competing for promotion. They didn't get it. He did it. I saw him doing like a thank you tweet this morning, suggests he's probably on the way out to some other gig, but I would imagine some other gig is another step up because he had a good season there. Like that's an example of the kind of thing we're talking about there. Lewis Toomey needs to be on that bandwagon next time. There's a couple other certain contenders I could throw up there, but in terms of like the age that he is and the ability that he's shown to just dominate National League games, that's a dude to keep a very close eye on, and he will surely be in the Olympic squad next year. He's still under 23, so I couldn't help but feeling watching him against the Phoenix reserves there. If he was 1 or 2 years younger, he'd probably be playing first team football right now under Giancarlo Italiano. Just didn't quite line up for him. He was a little bit too old, and so he had left by the time the new development ethos became kind of set in concrete there. So a little bit of awkward timing, but you know, many more opportunities than just the Wellington Phoenix going around football world.
And that's like, it is a realistic scenario where you can go from National League to professional league
Definitely.
in another country. Like that is happening right now. There are numerous examples, men and women going from national league straight in, not into like a moving up to the local pathway into the Phoenix or the new A-League team or whatever, but there are situations and examples of players going from the National League to professional football overseas.
Yeah, especially guys in that age range. So I'd suggest he's a fella to keep an eye out when the January transfer window rolls around. Jackie Hand is another one. I'm just throwing that one out because I haven't mentioned that on the podcast. Jackie Hand seems, by all accounts, like she's done in Finland herself. Pretty curious to see where she ends up, and it might be January, it might be wait till next year, but I'd imagine probably January because you don't really want to spend half a year out. Pretty curious to see where she ends up because she did actually have an extremely good World Cup as probably New Zealand's most creative attacking player, and we want those types of players playing at the highest level possible. We'll see how that goes.
That is the Niche Cast for today. We'll be back on Wednesday with a subscriber podcast, then a Thursday with the Niche Cast. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, chur.